موجب إطار الدعم والتعاون المؤسسي والفني الخاص بمشروع مركز السياسات العامة، يتعاون برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي عن كثب مع المركز لتعزيز قدرات مجال رصد الفجوات القائمة وتوحيد قواعد ومعايير العمل في إعداد السياسات البحثية والتحليلية في مجال صنع السياسات العامة والاستراتيجيات. ويسعى مركز الكويت للسياسات العامة ليصبح مركزا مرموقا من شأنه التأثير على السياسات والاستراتيجيات الوطنية. ويعتبر هذا المشروع نموذجيا لإطار عمل برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي في دولة الكويت لدعم الأعمال والأهداف والطموحات الخاصة بالأمانة العامة في تحقيق الجودة النوعية لعملية صنع السياسات والاستراتيجيات، وتمكين مركز السياسات العامة لدولة الكويت من الإسهام في تحقيق ذلك كونه أحد الإدارات التابعة للأمانة العامة. وضمن هذا الإطار فقد تم التعاقد مع كل من شركة أوكسفورد إيكونومكس، وهي إحدى المراكز الاستشارية العالمية المستقلة المتخصصة في الاستشارات الاقتصادية، وشركة بيركلي للأبحاث، وتكليفهم بمهام إنجاز تصميم وإعداد نموذج الاقتصاد الكلي الخاص بدولة الكويت وفقا لأحدث المعايير العالمية بهدف التحول إلى التخطيط المبني على الأدلة. وتهدف الفعالية اليوم بمشاركة الجهات الحكومية المعنية والمؤسسات الأكاديمية والبحثية ومنظمات المجتمع المدني إلى وضع آلية عمل نموذج الاقتصاد الكلي، كما تسلط الضوء على قدرات النموذج وأهميته بالنسبة لعملية صنع السياسات والقرارات الاستراتيجية في الأمور القطاعية الخاصة بالاقتصاد والاستثمار. وتسعى الفعالية إلى تحفيز الحوار حول السياسات الوطنية من خلال مناقشة نتائج دراسة قام بها فريق العمل استنادا إلى أرقام وأدلة مزودة من النموذج تدعو إلى إصلاح سوق العمل والآثار المترتبة على السياسات العامة ذات. ومن أهم أهداف برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي هو بناء القدرات الوطنية ونقل المعرفة، لذا فقد تم تنظيم وتنفيذ عدد من الدورات التدريبية على مدار السنة ليس فقط في مركز السياسات العامة لدولة الكويت، ولكن لعدد من الجهات الحكومية الأخرى مثل بنك الكويت المركزي ووزارة المالية والإدارة المركزية للإحصاء وهيئة تشجيع الاستثمار المباشر وغيرها. وأخيرا أود أن أشكر حضوركم اليوم ومشاركتنا في إطلاق النموذج، آملين أن يساعد النموذج الأمانة العامة للمجلس الأعلى للتخطيط والتنمية والجهات الحكومية في إجراء سيناريوهات تجريبية والخروج بتحليلات متعلقة بالسياسات العامة في دولة الكويت. شكرا جزيلا لكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. كلما ندعو إلى احتفال في إطلاق تقرير فني وأجد القاعة ممتلئة بما يثلج الصدر صراحة، وهذا أمر صراحة إيجابي وبالأخص لأهمية الموضوع. سعادة الدكتور طارق الشيخ المنسق المقيم للأمم المتحدة والممثل المقيم لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي، الضيوف والحضور الكرام، بداية يسرني أن أرحب بكم في بيت الأمم المتحدة مبنى الشيخ صباح الأحمد جابر الصباح حفظه الله ورعاه في فعالية لإطلاق نموذج الاقتصاد الكلي الوطني، وهو أحد المشاريع من ضمن إطار دعم قدرات مركز الكويت للسياسات العامة، وهو أحد الإدارات التابعة للأمانة العامة للمجلس الأعلى للتخطيط والتنمية، ويهدف إلى رفع جودة التخطيط والعملية التخطيطية فيما يتعلق في الاقتصاد. هذا المشروع يأتي من إطار تعاون مع الأمم المتحدة ومؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي والأمانة العامة للمجلس الأعلى للتخطيط والتنمية فيما يتعلق في دعم مركز الكويت للسياسات العامة. أتت الحاجة إلى وجود مركز للسياسات العامة في دولة الكويت، وبعد نقاش مشترك أيضا مع مؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي والأمانة العامة، كانت هناك حاجة ضرورية لوجود آلية ومنهجية محددة لوضع السياسات في الدولة بسياسات تكون مدعومة بالأدلة evidence-based public policy. وأتت الحاجة أصبحت أكثر إلحاحاً عند إعداد الخطة الإنمائية الثالثة 2020-2025 وهي الخطة الإنمائية الثالثة. الحاجة إلى سياسات مدعومة بالأدلة هو أمر أصبح الآن المنهجية الدارجة في جميع السياسات العامة في الدول المتقدمة والتي تضع خططها الاستراتيجية وفقا لهذه المنهجية والأسس العلمية. مركز الكويت للسياسات العامة، وهذه أنا باخذ فرصة في هذا المكان لأتكلم بعض الشيء عن هذا المركز وما يقوم فيه. المركز خلق تحالفات على مستوى المنطقة وعلى مستوى العالم، وأيضا بمباركة صراحة مع مؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي والبرنامج الإنمائي للأمم المتحدة في اتساع شبكة التعاون، وعليه فتكون شبكة التعاون في المركز شبكة محلية وإقليمية ودولية. لماذا نموذج اقتصاد كلي؟ هو ليست أول مرة يكون للكويت نموذج اقتصاد كلي. الكويت هي دولة عرفت في التخطيط الاستراتيجي والتخطيط الاقتصادي الاجتماعي، وكان انطلاقة النماذج الاقتصادية الكلية في عام 86 في نموذج معروف في دولة الكويت، وكان معهد الكويت للأبحاث العلمية دور في هذا النموذج. وتتالت النماذج أيضا بنماذج في الأمانة العامة المجلس الأعلى للتخطيط. هذا التطور العضوي لهذه النماذج يستلزم تحديث هذه النماذج مع زيادة وحرص في اعتماد البيانات الإحصائية. للعلم هذا النموذج الذي يطرح أمامكم هو مكون واحد من مجموعة مكونات للمنظومة المتكاملة للتخطيط والمتابعة. وأحد أهم المكونات في هذه المنظومة هو الشبكة الوطنية للبيانات الإحصائية، والتي تقوم الإدارة المركزية للإحصاء الآن في بنائها كأحد أهم مشاريع خطة التنمية. فمكون الإحصائي موجود في هذه المنظومة. أيضا هناك مجموعة من النماذج وهذا أحدها. يوجد هناك نموذج السام السوشيال اكاونت ماتريكس، نماذج أخرى أيضا متعلقة ايكونومتريكس مودلز. يعني عدد النماذج الموجودة في هذه المنظومة عدة نماذج، ويكون لدينا ما يسمى بجينيتيك ألغوريثم. هذا الجينيتيك ألغوريثم أو اللوغاريتمية تقوم بخلق الحلول المثلى لهذه النتائج اللي تخرج من النماذج، حتى نصل في نهاية المطاف إلى سياسات محكومة بدراسات علمية بقدر الإمكان. ودائما نحن نعلم في النماذج الرياضية، لأن أحد الأسئلة اللي دائما تسأل ماذا يعني نموذج اقتصادي؟ في النهاية هي مجموعة من المعادلات ومجموعة من الثوابت ومجموعة من البيانات الإحصائية يضعها المختصين من أجل التنبؤ في وضع اقتصادي معين ومؤشرات اقتصادية معينة. من أجل استدامة هذه العملية وبناء القدرات الوطنية سيكون لدينا في الأمانة العامة Operating Room أو War Room، غرفة عمليات تتيح للجميع بأن يجربوا سياسات معينة، ويقوم المختصين في هذا النموذج بآليات وضع السيناريوهات وتجربتها، أو مثل ما يقال شوك اكسبيرمنت في داخل النموذج. وهذه الغرفة ستكون مخصصة في الأمانة العامة من ضمن مركز الكويت للسياسات العامة. ومن يريد من الباحثين في تجريب هذه السيناريوهات لنعرف النتائج التي تخرج من هذا النموذج، الجميع مرحب به بالتنسيق مع الأمانة العامة. من أجل ضمان نجاح الخطط المرتبطة برؤية الكويت 2035 وبرامج العمل الحكومية الرامية إلى تنويع الاقتصاد، من الضروري جدا فهم النتائج المالية والاقتصادية قصيرة ومتوسطة الأجل والسياسات العامة ذات الصلة بغرض ضمان استدامة الوضع المالي لدولة الكويت وتطوير الاقتصاد المعرفي، وهو ما تصبو إليه رؤية 2035. في النهاية أود أن أشكر فرق العمل التي قامت من العديد من الجهات الذين كانوا سندا لنا في تطوير النموذج وتطوير المباني الرئيسية في بنائه. أشكر البنك المركزي على اهتمامه ووجوده في جميع الورش التي تمت، وزارة المالية للتعاون الرائع الذي استشفيناه منهم بمشاركاتهم، المؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي، معهد الكويت للأبحاث العلمية، وجميع الجهات التي ساهمت من هيئة تشجيع الاستثمار المباشر وغيرها من الجهات التي تبين حرصهم على أن يكونون شركاء معنا في الأمانة العامة لهذا الأمر. هي خطوة من خطوات نقوم بها لتطوير عملية التخطيط في دولة الكويت، وحرصا منا بأن تكون السياسات العامة في دولة الكويت في الخطة الإنمائية الثالثة هي على الأقل سياسات مبنية على أسس علمية، ونجعل لغة الأرقام هي التي تتكلم. اخترنا في هذا النموذج الذي سيعرض هذا اليوم وفقا للبيانات والنموذج الاقتصادي يطرح موضوع مهم جدا: ماذا لم استمرت دولة الكويت في سياسة التوظيف في القطاع الحكومي بهذه الطريقة التي نقوم بها؟ وما هي النتائج المتوقعة من هذه السياسة؟ وإن كنا نريد أن نقوم بإجراءات تصحيحية أو سياسات تصحيحية، فما هي السياسات التصحيحية؟ وما هي النسب التي تكون بالأرقام لعلاج هذا الأمر من أجل الاستدامة المالية لدولة الكويت؟ أشكركم واعذروني على الإطالة، لأن كان مهم جدا عندي أني أوضح الشركاء الموجودين معنا، وأتمنى بأن يكون لدينا شركاء أكثر، لأن من خيركم من جمع عقول الناس لعقل نفسه. وهذه هي الفكرة التي تقوم عليها الأمانة العامة للمجلس الأعلى للتخطيط والتنمية في تطوير عملية التخطيط.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank, as we're getting started, His Excellency Dr. Khada. This has been a labor of love for us, and I know it builds on his excellent work in SCPD over the last, since you began 3-4 years ago. It's about when I came to Kuwait. I think everyone in this room and outside can acknowledge the efforts he's made, not necessarily in comparison to past individuals that have held that post, but certainly he's given everyone a shake and started to knock heads together. And I think this project, along with all the efforts of KPPC, has really made a mark in terms of getting people on the same page. We'll talk about some of the challenges now, but really I think hopefully this is certainly a milestone, but it's only a beginning for his efforts and I think the efforts of the entire government to do this work properly. Just to give you an outline of the rest of the schedule, I'm going to talk very, very briefly. My name is Jared Willis, for those of you who don't know me, but a lot of us, I know we've met in stakeholder meetings and this project, outside of this project. We're going to do a very, very brief presentation on sort of our work process and what happened over the last 9 months. Some of you have been involved at different points in the process, so we'll just give you a quick overview and an update and a little bit on next steps. Then my colleague from Oxford Economics, Graham Harrison, is going to give a very detailed and comprehensive overview of the model itself. And then I'll come back at the end, and we did sort of to give you food for thought and test the robustness of the model. We've done a small white paper, which we'll present the data from. And then we're going to try and finish a bit early so we have plenty of times for question and answer which we hope that you'll be taking notes so you can put us on the spot as best as possible. Just to briefly start this few-minute presentation, we're going to speak somewhat repeating what Dr. Khalid said about our mandate and what came before us in terms of this type of macroeconomic model. We're going to be very frank about some of the challenges we faced, which should be no surprise, and then talk a bit about some of the stakeholder engagement, both what we did and what we learned from it, and then a bit about next steps. So as Dr. Khalid mentioned, our mandate was the UNDP supporting SCPD to enhance institutional capabilities across the Kuwaiti government by providing necessary technical support to strengthen capabilities and skills to perform their duties. Under the framework of the UNDP support for SCPD is the establishment of the Kuwait Public Policy Center, and this pioneering center is supposed to address policy-making gaps by providing mainstream policy research, analysis, and studies in the policy-making process. I think, to put it frankly, there's a situation where there's a lot of consultants like us running around. Each ministry has their own consultants. Each ministry in some ways have their own data. I think the mandate of the KPPC and what's striving to do is to deal with some of those issues that have developed, get everybody working on the same data, everyone working with the same experts, everybody agreeing what the issues are, and then hopefully, collaborating on what the way forward is. Our mandate is Oxford Economics. They're one of the world's foremost independent global economic advisory firms. They are, the premier firm for this type of macroeconomic model. They have, I'll let Graham give a better explanation than me. They have global economic models that they have for many countries, and then they've done a lot of customized models both in the GCC and elsewhere. So this isn't new. The user interface was something that was already existing. It was simply taking what they already had for Kuwait and customizing it. That's where we came in. We partnered with them because we thought that this would be it. Rather than each company, the tendency of consulting firms is to try and take it all for themselves. We thought that this was a project of such strategic importance that it's something that needed to be done collaboratively. So we brought our expertise here as a KDIPA established company that's been in the country for several years and worked on some of these issues to bring our data expertise and engagement with stakeholders and make sure that the work that they were doing on their end reflected the policy priorities and some of the challenges here in Kuwait. Again, the overarching goal is to support the transition towards planning based on economic modeling and also building national technical capacity. I think it's no surprise the model in itself doesn't give you the answers. You have to know how to run the model. You have to know how to get data into the model. But I think that there's a very healthy process that happened in the last 9 months and will continue to happen, which is engagement and agreeing on the data, having an honest discussion about some of the issues, and then coming up with the right way forward. I think the intention of the model, as Dr. Khalid mentioned, is to be used by national stakeholders in designing and implementing the 5-year plans, Vision 2035, the Kuwait Master Plan, and other policy recommendations. Again, as part of our efforts, we looked at some of the other macroeconomic models that have been built for Kuwait. There are several. We looked at them, and I think that we have 2 comments to share at this point. I'm sure that they went through a very strong work effort and tried an engagement with stakeholders and the data to do something that would be serving the interests of policymakers. The unfortunate reality is they're either not tailored or comprehensive enough for medium and long-term development planning, and they're simply not, they never got off the ground. They didn't reach critical mass, and they're not in use. So it's not a critique of any work effort. It was simply an effort for us to understand the truth and the reality of it so that we would try not to make the same mistakes. Oops. Again, in the spirit of honesty and transparency, these are some of the challenges we face and some of the lessons we learned. Obviously, I think it will be no surprise to anyone in this room that, and everyone warned us ahead of time about issues of data accessibility and availability. We're very grateful for the individuals from Central Statistics Bureau, many of whom were in this room, who were extremely collaborative and cooperative with us, with our requests, our special requests, our requests for clarification. They were very honest with us on some of the challenges that they face. Stakeholders were very honest with us about the differences in some of the data, the periodicity, the availability. So I think we had a very good picture of that. Clearly there's some room to improve, but frankly, there is a lot of very good data, and I think people have a good picture of it. And certainly we did a comprehensive effort to look at the research that's done in Kuwait and sort of take, whether it's the private sector, the banking sector, how they view some of the data, so that we could take that all into account. And I think that when you see and you test the model, you'll see that we've taken that into account as best as possible. Another mission that we took on ourselves was really to collaborate and build bridges across the government entities. I think it's really easy. We had, as I'll say in the next slide, we had lots of trainings, we had lots of meetings. It's really easy to sort of do that and just for the sake of checking the box. That was not our intention. I think, as some of you probably know, we were very aggressive, as was Dr. Khalid, in sending letters and going through official channels, as well as beating down on doors, badgering you with text messages and phone calls, and sometimes outright ambushing people when we couldn't get a meeting. So please forgive us for that aggression, but it was in the sake of trying to do this in the right way within the time frame that we were allotted. And like I said, there's still room to go, but we're very pleased with the results. And another issue, which should be no surprise to people, is capacity capabilities. The KPPC is a new entity. The SCPD is not. The UNDP is also supporting in many ways the building of capacities, both by recruiting staff and training the staff that are there. I think our efforts very much fit into that. And I hope that we brought a spirit of honesty and frankness to that discussion about what's possible, what's not, where is there room to grow. A lot of the KPPC staff is on the side there. I think it was a rough start, only in the sense that there were new people coming, there were people going, and we were trying to figure out, but I think we have a great core team right now who are extremely helpful. Everyone sort of fell into their own role, and we moved from a situation where people were waiting around to be told what to do, to people taking initiative, and I think feeling hopefully an element of pride in being a part of the KPPC team and also part of our team. Just to give you some numbers around that, we have the core model group, which consisted of some KPPC economists, some of them on a consulting basis, other people from the SCPD staff and KPPC staff. We had a secondary model group, I think because this 9-month process was to build the model rather than to run the model. In some ways, these were advisory sessions or to generate interest, to get feedback. And I think we had 4 trainings over 9 months with about 100 staff from various ministries and sectors of the economy. I think, as some of you know, maybe there was some skepticism in the beginning. What is this? Is this a waste of my time? Is this just going to be like everything else? But I think the fact that we had several dozen people attend in the heat of the summer, many from the oil sector, shows that the word got out that Dr. Khalid was serious. He was going to chase people down. This was a serious effort, and it's better to be on board and know what's going on than to be left behind. And again, this is no surprise to many of you who were involved in these meetings. We had over 33 meetings with government officials, sometimes came back multiple times, repeat consultations with technical staff and people underneath that. And again, I think that was part of our strategy in splitting the work with Oxford Economics, because we're here on the ground, we could be aggressive in making sure we got to meet the people that we wanted to get information from. Next steps, Dr. Khalid spoke about this a little bit, and we'll get to a bit later on. Obviously, you have the Rolls Royce of models here. Graham's going to tell you more of the technical specifications, but this is by far, you can't get any fancier than this, you can't get any more robust than this, you can't get any more user-friendly than this. And I think that in order for it to maximize its utility to the country, there's going to have to be continued data sharing and development of the model. In some ways, the point of this is to sort of, this whole day is to provoke you a little bit, maybe get you to find mistakes we've made, or not necessarily mistakes, things that can be improved, things that, just to question it. If we do that today, then we've succeeded, because that means you are interested and you'll stay engaged with this. Because the whole point is to have a process where everyone's in the room talking about it and running scenarios and then figuring out together how to implement them. I think under the KPPC, you're going to see a very robust schedule, activities not necessarily involving the model, but also based on the model, whether it's public forums, discussions of scenarios, and then also joint white papers. We've sort of worked on a white paper which we'll present shortly to get the ball rolling, but I think what we've talked about, the vision for this is that KPPC, along with different ministries, can come to KPPC and say, I have this policy issue, can we run the scenarios jointly and then issue a joint white paper? So I'm hopeful that by the end of this time next year, you'll be able to go on KPPC website and download 10 or 15 white papers, all in the same format, with the same logo and the same graphic design on some of the top issues that are facing Kuwait, and hopefully there'll be some consensus around at least the validity of the effort to try and figure out the best way forward. That's all I have for now. I'm going to turn it over to Graham to go over the technical specifications of the model.
Hi, good morning. As Jared has said, my name is Graham Harrison from Oxford Economics. I'm head of macro consultant for the Middle East, Africa and Europe region. As Jared said, Oxford Economics does many things. It does forecast and it does impact analysis, but one of the big growing areas of our business in recent years has been the request to develop customized models for GCC countries, particularly with oil prices falling, with the challenges countries face. There's a recognition of the challenges and the need to look ahead and to think about risks and to chart a different pathway for economies and to use a model and to use the quantification that the model allows to help with that process. I think maybe it's also, I should show a bit of humor. I mean, Jared talks about this being the Rolls-Royce model. I think it's important to be a bit more modest. We have done our best, but a model is only as good as the input it gets and the collaboration and the use as well. It's very normal it takes a model to be developed before people show more interest, start to critique it, start to use it as well. So I think the challenge for I don't think it's right to say now this is a perfect model because we don't know it. It's in one sense we have tested it, but you as users and stakeholders have not. We're proud of our work. We have tested it, but I think the real test of this model is in the months ahead. And I think this launch is only the start of the journey with this model, not the end. And I think our experience in other countries is so much effort goes into getting to this point, but actually all the effort should come after as well. And Dr. Hallett wants this model to be accessible to a wide range of stakeholders. He wants you to use it. And I think it is very relevant to lots of work and issues across Kuwait. So I do really encourage you to use the model. And the purpose of today is really to sort of educate you and explain about what the model is, what it does, and then Jared will show you one application example of the model as well. So the structure of the presentation is to talk about some of the actual outputs of the project, the coverage of the model and the features, its robustness in the types of tests we've done with the model, its capabilities, how it can be applied, and anything crucially conditions for success. As I said, we can do so much, but it's this last point that's really going to determine the success and the return on the investment in the model. As I said, it's the journey only begins now for the model. It's not the end. So we've produced a lot of outputs so far from the model. This, just so you know too, I don't know how much people are working. When you say you develop a model, what does that physically look like? This is a screenshot of the Oxford model software here in the bottom corner. So we have our own model software. We did have an existing model of Kuwait, a sort of small generic model, but now we have this sort of big 4,000 variable customized model. So the key delivery is delivery of model software and delivery of the customized model for Kuwait, which sits within our global economic model system as well, which allows you to do things like you can run a global shock, see how it affects the world economy and see how that filters through to Kuwait. So I think that's one difference from this model to others, is it's built within a global economic framework, so you can look at global risks. And I think that's very relevant, not just to SCPT, particularly the Ministry of Finance, KIA. You can look at how different shocks affect global asset returns, how that might affect the portfolio of KIA, how some of the variables that we produce will be of high interest to the Ministry of Finance. And a key point I want to make too is there's definitely room in a country for more than one model. This isn't a model to take over all other models. Models have different specializations, different purposes. One of the key purposes of this model was for long-term planning, so it has a time frame to 2050. And models should complement one another and not compete. So other things we've done too, we've produced a model design report after the first couple of months to say how the model was going to be designed, its structure, the linkages. We produced a testing report, so we did our own tests of the model to check that it was robust. And very soon there will be a model documentation of the model and a user manual, so explaining the theory of the model and then how to use the model and to run different applications. What I would say is our model software is very user friendly. Nobody here should be scared of using the model. I'm not saying it's a model built for dummies, but we have invested a lot as a company to make our software almost like click button software. So you certainly don't need any computer programming skills. You don't even need to be an economist. Just a little initiative and a little interest. You can just click. There's a button here, popular change. You can just change oil prices. Click solve and see what it means for Kuwait. And the software allows you to compare between different scenarios. So nobody in this room should be afraid of trying to use this model. So it's already been mentioned, it's a big comprehensive model. Again, don't let that put you off. We haven't just thrown in variables for the sake of it. There's a good reason for what we've included. So it has over 4,000 variables and over 3,000 equations. Now, not all variables have equations because some are exogenous or held flat, which is normal in any model. There are sort of 15 modules to the model. Many of these are sort of conventional macroeconomic sectors like GDP, investment, balance of payments, fiscal. But there's also some sort of added modules to reflect the specific characteristics of the Kuwait economy. So we've got a module for KIA. We've got probably a more detailed module for the energy sector compared to what we could have for other countries. Our golden rule has been to use CSV data as far as possible, but we've also used data that's published from the primary sources like CDK, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Energy and Water. It's a model that has historic data, so actually if you just want to look at the history of Kuwait, the model stores all of the history, but it also is forecast out to 2050. And one of the key advantages that's being housed within the Oxford Global model is you have access to data from many other countries, so you can do benchmarking with other countries as well. And it's an annual frequency model. So these are just the 15 different modules. Again, many of the conventional macroeconomic sectors. I think a couple of things to draw your attention to is for demographics and labour market, we split nationals and non-nationals because it's a critical feature of the economy. Obviously on fiscal, we've got revenue and expenditure and debt and assets and the financing of a deficit. We use the CSB input-output table to drive our sectoral industry forecast as well. So we have a link between the demand side and the industry side in the economy. Given it's a long-term model for planning, the supply side is key. So we have sort of production function equations for the main broad sectors of the economy. It's really important because in the short term you can change demand in an economy and you'll get a reaction. But in the long term, it's the supply side that's going to drive the outputs for the economy. And we've broken that into more detail, and that will be critical for looking at Vision 2035 and how to achieve a better economic outcome. As I said, the software that the model is built in is extremely user friendly in terms of being able to view the model, be able to form basic functions, and to sort of analyze the data as well. So it has got an inbuilt dashboard system to look at results for different scenarios. You can do a comparison of different countries for the same variables. You've got these sort of click buttons to the side here where you can do popular changes, specified changes, as I said, you don't need to do any programming. The model, the model software is designed to allow you to do most of what you need to do. In terms of features then, I mean, we would describe it as a structural macroeconometric model, specifically designed for long-term planning. And then this was the model that we deemed most appropriate for what SCPD needed. As I said, look, there are other types of models, CGE models for a very specific task, and that's fine. We're not saying that this negates the need for other types of models. What we'd actually encourage is more different types of models, but that those models complement one another as well. It's a sort of long-term equilibrium model, so that the economy does get back to equilibrium in the long term, and it's got sort of very Kuwait-specific policy rules and characteristics. So the key features that are built into the model, obviously oil is an important sector to Kuwait. Kuwait is a member of OPEC, so that is a feature reflected in the model. Kuwait has an exchange rate basket peg as well, which means this exchange rate is going to depend on exchange rate movements in other countries and the monetary policies of those countries as well. So the advantage of having this in a global framework is you have those important linkages. We've got the transfer of revenue to the Future Generation Fund, and I mean, the model is actually set up that you could draw down the Future Generation Fund if you wanted, but the default setup is not to permit that. We've got any surplus revenue transferred to the General Reserve Fund. Even how we've set up the public sector employment and Article 41 of the Constitution, which quasi-guarantees jobs for Kuwaiti nationals. We've reflected that in the model design, and this is a feature of the model that Jared will talk about in the white paper, and even sort of demographics and the non-national population, how that's heavily linked to the economy as well. I'll not go into too much detail on this slide, but I think what's really important from a planning perspective is most macro models are quite top-down. This model is actually much more bottom-up. So GDP is actually the sum of the sectoral output. So you can run shocks to different sectors, and that will feed through to the different sectors of the economy and produce a new aggregate GDP through the input-output framework. Given it's structured with long-term production functions, you can put more investment into a different sector. You can change the total factor productivity of a sector, and the impact of that will filter through the economy. CPI is a weighted index of the different CPI categories, which is particularly important for thinking about price reforms as well. So the aggregate CPI is determined by the bottom-up detail. Exports are the sum of the different export categories. So we split oil from non-oil, and we split non-oil into different goods and services. Even things like demographics in the labour market are the sum of Kuwaiti nationals and non-nationals. And then even something like income of households is the sum of different income sources as well. So you can see how we've arrived at these 4,000 variables, because it's more detailed, it's more bottom-up. And the more detailed, the more bottom-up allows you to have better linkages within the model. In any model, there's always going to be sort of a set of exogenous variables. If everything in the model was endogenous, determined by an equation, it actually makes the model hard to solve. But there are also a lot of variables where there isn't an obvious equation, or actually the forecast for that variable, is better arrived at from a different source and doesn't really change in a scenario. So a couple of sectors like agriculture GDP, it doesn't tend to react too much to other sectors. The input-output coefficient variables, the advantage of what we've got here is we've included those as variables. So CSB actually updates its input-output table quite frequently. It's very important for how the structure of the economy is changing. So rather than embed these coefficients within equations, they're incorporated as variables. So when there's a new input-output table, it's very easy to update the coefficients. It also allows you to dynamically change input-output coefficients to reflect the change in the economy. If you're going to have a long-term model to 2035 for the vision, it would be wrong to hold those coefficients fixed, because the economy will change. So it allows that. The CPI basket weights are fixed, but when the CPI is rebased, it's very easy then to update those weights in the model. We've even got some about the electricity supply mix, so if there's a shift towards different sources of electricity, if there's a move towards renewables or solar, and what the implication that has for oil demand as well. That's a variable in the model which can be adjusted. I think Kuwaiti demographics, are forecast separately, and they don't tend to change so much with what's going on elsewhere in the model, so that's fixed as well. And for example, the currency basket pegs, they're largely fixed, but if you wanted to change those, you could change them in the model. So I think you can see, there are many, these type of variables, maybe Ministry of, the oil sector, the energy sector, the housing sector, it's actually got a lot of variables of interest, and you could flex some of the assumptions in the model to see how it impacts on your variables of interest. Just to repeat, so this customized Kuwait model is part of the Oxford Global Economic Model System, and there are lots of linkages to Kuwait. So if the global outlook changes, or if you want to run a global scenario, these are the kind of transmission mechanisms that will feed through to the Kuwait economy. So the Oxford Global Model has a full energy module, so it has energy demand from all the major economies, energy supply from all the producers, and prices as well. So you could run a shock to the Chinese economy, a shock to Venezuela or Iran oil output, and see what that means for prices, and have that link come through to Kuwait. I mean, as far as I know, that kind of capability is not present in any of the other models, but it's obviously probably the number one risk to the Kuwait economy is what developments in the energy sector. You've also got world gas prices too. Even the model is set up, for Saudi to be a swing producer if necessary as well. Obviously, inward FDI to Kuwait is determined by outbound FDI from other economies. Kuwait's non-energy exports are determined by import demand from its trading partners, but also competitiveness factors. You've got different world prices feed into Kuwaiti prices. Kuwait is a very import-dependent economy, so if there are a change in world prices and exchange rates, that will feed through to domestic price levels. For KIA, we've got global asset variables in this model as well. So with some of the investments held in different assets, we've got the forecast for those, but you can also have the link to those. So if you want to look at the portfolio of KIA, you'll be able to forecast your expected returns, or under different scenarios, how those returns might change to maybe to readjust your portfolio. And we do have sovereign wealth funds that subscribe to our models for that specific reason. Obviously, if there are changes in the currencies of the different countries that Kuwait pegs to, that will change. And also, too, we've got a link between, particularly US Fed interest rates and ECB interest rates to Kuwait's interest rate, given the exchange rate regime. So when we develop a model, obviously we have to test it. You don't just put in data, build equations, click solve, and assume you've got your model. In fact, when you try to click solve for the first time in the model, it invariably crashes or something is going wrong. So we've got certain steps to follow for testing our model. Although, as I said later, I would call this the sort of first. This is the test that we would do, but there's much more testing can be done by users as well. And as it's the launch of the model, I'm glad to say that the model has passed all the Oxford tests so far. So when you run the model and you try to run a scenario, you change something, hopefully you get this message here that the model has solved. So one of the testing phases is just what we call unfixing and solving. So unfixing really means that all of the equations in the model are active. When we're setting a forecast, what we do is we might apply some of our own forecasts. We already have forecasts for the Kuwait economy, so we might apply those forecasts that overwrites the equation. But then when we unfix the model, all of the equations become active and all the variables potentially change when you run a shock apart from the exogenous variables. And this process, that will reveal some problems in equations that we then have to fix. And And the way the model works, the model solves on an iterative basis. So it tries to solve for each period, and then it moves on to the next period. And the way the Oxford model works is it can solve simultaneously because you've got a lot of interlinkages between variables. I think a good example is, revenue might determine expenditure. Expenditure determines sort of growth in the economy, which then feeds back to revenue. So there's a circular cycle in how the economy works. And if you were to build this model, say in Microsoft Excel, that has circular reference issues, it wouldn't solve. But the Oxford model can solve simultaneously. It then just does these tests of convergence that it keeps solving until the model stabilizes and variables no longer change. And so it's given this is a model out to 2050, it has to solve the model annually to 2050 across the 4,000 variables as well. But the fact that the model can do that is one of the key tests. Another test then that's linked to that is a stability test. Is when the model keeps solving, you want to get to the point where the variables in the model stop changing, otherwise it would be unstable. So this is another test that the model has passed. So out to 2050, when you keep solving the model, the key variables are no longer changing. So that's quite sort of a technical testing process. What next we did, we call a sort of property test, is we ran a lot of shocks through the model to see that we get the expected results. The initial tests were just the sort of standard Oxford model test, where we would say reduce Q8 government consumption, we would change the exchange rate or interest rates or oil prices, and then we changed, we made more bespoke shocks specific to the Q8 model. So we changed non-oil manufacturing total factor productivity. We played around with oil prices and production at the same time. Increased government wages and salaries, increased government investment, because it's quite useful to see that you get different results if you change different parts of government expenditure. And then, the model is also set up for some new non-oil revenue measures. So what happens if VAT was introduced? So we have built this model to sort of last. It's not necessarily completely based on all current policies. We would imagine at some point in the next 5-10 years, VAT will be introduced to Kuwait. Now the assumptions are that VAT is 0%, it's not introduced, but if or when it is, the model is capable of doing that. And all you have to do is put in the VAT rate, and the model will calculate the revenue effect and the impact throughout the economy as well. Now you'll not really be able to sort of see this slide, but what this is the results of all these scenario tests against a large list of core macro variables as well. So we looked through that, and the model produced sort of a negative impact or a positive impact to the baseline in line with expectations, and the scale of the impact as well was within what we would think is reasonable as well. So this is a very comprehensive test. What I would say as well, though, going forward, I would encourage you to do your own tests, look at your own scenarios. These are sort of single variable, or some are maybe, oil prices and oil production shocks as well. You can run more complicated scenarios, with 5, 10, 15, 20 changes in the model. And that's what you do. We've done many tests, but there are many more tests could be done. As I said, this testing, what we've done, is just the start of the process. It's going to be very important over time to continue to check that the model is stable and, test it with different model applications. We have done this analysis on government deployment, but there are many other different types of scenarios you could do. We would encourage internal and external model peer review as well. The model is very transparent. In the software, you can look up the equations. There's model documentation. There'll be a description of equations, a description of linkages, the exact equations as well. So it's, if you want to do a review, everything is there for you to do. I mean, the model is just developed, but obviously one of the key tests, it's a forecast model as well. Does it forecast? Does it get things right? And obviously with someone like Q8, the forecast is very much dependent on what happens with oil prices or government spending. But there is another way that you can, so you might get the forecast wrong because you got the oil price wrong or oil production or government spending. But what you can then do is this concept of back testing, where you can go back and fill in what the outturns were for a few key variables, and then see would the model have predicted what actually happened. And there's also, you can do a very large scale if there's a particular big shock. So what we did as a company, following the sort of global recession caused by the credit crunch, is we asked ourselves, why did our model not predict it? And we did this major backtesting exercise to realize that we needed to change our model that would have predicted it and would have captured the size of the effects as well. And that, that's something important to do for Q8 too. And just ongoing validation where, you go through the equation, if you get a couple more years of data, you look at whether the equations are still valid as well. Particularly given the future of the economy could be quite different with new reforms, a new global energy market environment as well. In terms of equations, this is a little technical, but there are different types of equations in the model. Some are identities, which are just variables of the sum of other variables. So total GDP is the sum of the industry sectors. Some are transformations, which might be that a variable in dollar values is just equal to the local currency multiplied by the exchange rate. So the important ones are really the behavioural equations. And where possible, we've estimated those, we based those equations on economic theory, that they reflect the specific characteristics of Q8. We try not to overcomplicate equations if we don't need to, because it helps with the transparency of the model and simplicity. And we do try to econometrically estimate the data as well. Now, linked to Jared's point as well, there is a limit to econometric. We would like to econometrically estimate every behavioural equation in the model, but that's not always possible. If you don't have a long time series of data that doesn't have any structural breaks, it's really hard. But we did as much as we could. In fact, we were quite disappointed by some of the results we got. But we were already dealing with a small sample in terms of the time series. Some of the results we got were sort of counterintuitive. And even the likes of the IMF and many other modelers defend a different approach where you calibrate the coefficients with your own assumptions, your own judgment, and maybe coefficients from other countries with better data as well. You could develop equations that sort of fit the history perfectly, but then when it comes to forecasting and scenarios, they give you a completely wrong result. So there's a trade-off between econometric estimation and calibration, and we tried as far as possible to get that balance right. But this is, there'll be people here who are experts in a particular area, who maybe written their own papers in one variable, and if you've got a good equation, you're happy. It's actually very easy to change that in the model software, and we would be very open to changes in those equations. Moving on now to capabilities. This just lists what the model can do. So first of all, it's a forecast model. It can produce projections to 2050, but also produces projections for the short term and the medium term. What's really important in a model is that it's a consistent framework. So with the linkages in the model, if you change one variable, it feeds through to others. Sometimes some of the types of more basic models, you have to plug in a lot more of your own assumptions, and you might put something in for government spending, and you might put something in for GDP, but actually GDP is heavily driven by government spending, and you can get inconsistency between forecasts. But this kind of consistent endogenous framework, ensures that the whole forecast and the whole outlook is more consistent. It can be used for sort of policy impact analysis. The white paper we show you is around policies towards government hiring. You can look at alternative scenarios. So I'm going to talk later about global scenarios, but equally you can do domestic scenarios, like for example the introduction of VAT. I think risk analysis is increasingly, I think what we find as a business that post the global recession, everybody got interested in risks and scenarios and stress testing. So the work that we did on the demand from our clients around scenarios and stress testing really increased after 2009 and continues to be very high. And I think for an economy like Q8, so dependent on oil production and oil prices, this is key. I think kind of a key application as well is not just using the model and sitting there and doing analysis, but actually producing reports that people read. I don't expect everyone to go into the model and do their own scenarios and look at the numbers, but you produce a 5-page, 10-page report on an interesting topic, like the white paper will present, and that can get a lot of attention. And the true value of the model is sort of the outputs and the written documents and the analysis, not having the model sit that only one or two people are using. That said to it, it is important to manage expectations of the model. So as much as we've tried to make the capabilities of the model as wide as possible, it can't do everything, and in fact no model can. If you tried it to be the perfect model for everything, it wouldn't be the perfect model for anything actually. So as I said, there is still room for different types of models. The Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, for CGE models. We encourage different models. We encourage different models to look at the same questions, compare results. We also encourage models to, what we would say, talk to one another. It might be that the SCPD macro model can provide really important inputs to the Ministry of Finance models and tools, but then the Ministry of Finance does the fiscal side in more detail. So I think there will always be more specialised models for specific tasks, and we encourage this sort of collaborative and complementary approach as opposed to competing. To give an example, as a company we do a lot of impact around trade policy, the impact of the US leaving NAFTA or the US imposing tariffs on China. We do our trade analysis using a specialised trade model. Then we then take the outputs of that model and feed it into our global economic model, because some of these specialised models also have their limitations as well. You could do the same with CGE models, or Kuwait has a more detailed energy model. We could take the outputs from that and put it into this model. What it's not a tool for individual project assessment. It doesn't do the rate of return, or it doesn't do cost benefit analysis, but you can still take the results from those project impact analysis and feed it into the model. It's not an optimization model. You don't put in, I want GDP to be X in 2035, how do I get there? But if you can run different simulations on the model, it can help you to get towards a certain end position, if that position is feasible. I think that's a very important thing about Vision 2030. I think a big test, is Vision 2035 achievable? If you run through like a model and any of the constraints and issues that appear, that's what you learn by that process is actually better than just some solution that gets you straight there. It doesn't tell you what policies you need to implement. It doesn't have, but you can look at the impact of different policies and it flags issues. So a key one might be, is Vision 2035 achievable with a currency peg? If you want to develop your non-oil economy, reduce imports, is that possible with sort of a strong currency? And that's the kind of question that the model could help to answer. So I'm going to talk now about the applications of the model. I think with Dr. Hallett and Jared have covered most of this already, so it's about a transition towards planning based on economic modelling. So I would say, coming up with Vision 2035 or 5-year plans, start with the modelling. What does the model say the outlook is? What we sometimes find is, not necessarily in Kuwait, but other countries develop their vision, and then we're asked to model, and then they develop a set of programs and initiatives, and then we get asked the question, will those deliver the outcomes as well? Quite often you find that the initiatives fall well short. They're missing initiatives as well. So it is good to sort of do this modelling, quantitative analysis at the start of the process, and have just generally policy strategy development more informed by quantitative analysis. And I think it's a tool to help with policy. Very specific issues are very big initiatives like looking at the vision as well. And what we've tried to do in our white paper is just look at one issue around government hiring. I think one big thing we've learned in this project is it's actually extremely hard to create a forecast for Kuwait, just a baseline or business as usual. And I think this is a process. This is something that we have learned in this project is what is the process to set the outlook for the economy. And I think a business as usual is really important to just see under sort of past trends, almost like a no reform scenario. The same behaviours in the past. What does that mean for the economy? and you might want to apply conservative assumptions for oil production and oil prices. So if you just continue along the same pathway, business as usual, what is the outlook for the economy? Because what that does then is it identifies the challenge and risks ahead, the scale of that challenge, and then if there are any big risks, the timing. And I think that's really one of the things that Jared will show later in government hiring. If the sort of past trends in the expansion of government employment and the share of Q80s, young Q80s entering government and employment continues, given demographics, what does that mean for the government wage bill? What does it mean for the sustainability of public finances? Because what you can then do is set that in the context of the reforms and think, are those reforms anywhere near the scale that is needed? What would it mean for unemployment? So I think this business as usual really helps to make the case for reform, or in other countries it might validate, what you've been doing in the past will work perfectly fine in the future. So that's one scenario that I think is really important, to highlight those challenges and the risks and when they might occur. Then the baseline is more what I would call is a most likely outlook for the economy. And again, that's important for benchmarking against other scenarios. So there are some reforms being implemented in Kuwait, and it's important that those reforms, particularly those that are certain to happen, have been announced, that you reflect those in the model. And even there may be some expected change in behaviour as well. What you would want to also put in this scenario, where the Ministry of Finance has set its projections for expenditure and oil production and oil prices. So I want to almost take in the assumptions of other stakeholders, taking what's sort of confirmed as new policy, what does that scenario look like as well? And then actually a third scenario, because we think this third scenario is still probably needed, is a sustainable public finances scenario. So, what we have done is a business as usual does not lead to sustainable public finances. It's unlikely even that a baseline forecast would lead to sustainable public finances because of the outlook for oil prices and oil production, and just how heavily dependent Kuwait is on oil as well. So as I said, I think that the baseline in the business as usual will still have real sustainability issues in the future that would actually lead to a macroeconomic crisis, in which nobody wants. The reason I bring this up is, if this is built into, like, say, a vision, there's almost no point in having a vision scenario in 2035 that actually by 2025 there's going to be a macroeconomic crisis, and it invalidates that scenario. So this scenario would look at the conditions under which public finances can be sustainable and the macroeconomic crisis can be avoided. I'm not trying to be doomsday and very negative, but it is, when you look at the numbers further out, it is a genuine, real risk. And this is actually something that we started to do, because we want a scenario against which you can run scenarios that's stable as well. But we actually think this scenario is one that has to be done in collaboration with other stakeholders, because when we did this, the sorts of things we had to change in the model was, reduce the amount of future generation, the transfer to the future generation fund, allow the future generation fund to finance the government budget, reduce the number of Kuwaitis going into government, increase borrowing limits, have lower, have a rule to constrain expenditure. But lots of these policies are like sort of, big strategic decisions. So that, these are the sorts of things that we think are necessary. I think creating this sustainable scenario should be done in collaboration with other stakeholders. Once you've got that, then you can start to run sort of other types of scenarios. Again, the model isn't all about predicting bad outcomes and negative risks. It's a tool to help navigate towards a better outcome. So recognize the challenges, but respond to the challenges and create a better future. So what you could then do is you could then put in the sort of Vision 2035 goals on top of that scenario, a scenario that's built on a sustainable fiscal future. But again, what about more downside scenarios? So what if, for example, oil prices stayed at $40 or there was another oil shock? It is important to look at the downside as well. As I said, one of the key, I think, what we'd want you to move towards is actually producing reports using the model. this is an example of a big study that Oxford Economics did using its model on the economic implications of Brexit. A white paper could be simply changing one or two variables in the model, or it could be a much more complex scenario, but the model is capable of doing that. So something like Brexit is very complex, what it means for trade, for migration, for business regulation, a whole host of things. And we were able to analyse that impact using our global model. So you could do something similar with the Kuwait model, given how sophisticated and comprehensive it now is. And the value of our work was not in the numbers sitting in a model, it was in the production of this report. There are lots of things you can change in the model as well. I think it's important to identify levers in the model, so things that we would recommend you change in the model. You shouldn't obviously, there's certain equations you shouldn't overwrite. You shouldn't, for example, put in your own GDP forecast, because GDP is actually driven by sectors. But these are the kind of levers, global and domestic. They're only a selection. There are many more variables that you can change. Another application I've talked about is global macro risk analysis. Again, this is something that's maybe not possible to do with existing models because they're not built within a global framework. But Oxford Economics has a global scenario service, said this was created post the global financial recession because there was a demand for alternative outlooks. Companies, governments became much more aware of risks, and the probability of the most likely scenario was just not high enough for that to be the only outcome that stakeholders considered. So every quarter we run a survey about what corporates with governments see as the biggest risks, and then we run these scenarios through our model. So we've got a scenario about a global trade war, one where you've got financial market turmoil, one where there's actually something linked to Iranian sanctions which push up oil prices, one where actually an upside scenario where concerns about trade wars precipitate as well. And here we've got the percentage probabilities. So you can see actually the probabilities, they're not tiny. These are potential. It's not. Our baseline probability typically hovers around 50-40%. So it's really important that you plan and know the implications of other outcomes for the economy, particularly given that these global developments impact so heavily on oil prices, which will impact on Kuwait. So this is the result for oil prices for these different scenarios. So the top block is just the Brent crude price in dollars, and down below the sort of difference from the baseline as well. So you can see, in this sort of market turmoil scenario, oil prices would fall to $57 per barrel in 2020 compared to the Oxford baseline of 73. These are sort of big shocks as well. The shocks also, we do this annually as well, so sometimes you tend to get bigger shocks in the short term, and then you almost get back towards the baseline later on. And I've just shown here then the impacts on nominal GDP growth for Kuwait. So, nominal, quite often we look at real GDP, but nominal GDP is also important as well. So in the market turmoil scenario, nominal GDP would grow by 9 percentage points less than in the baseline scenario. So that's the type of analysis you can run through the model and see the impacts across a host of variables. I think there's just a couple more slides. It's when we've been running the different scenarios, and as Jared will present, the potentially unsustainable public finance outlooks, the model doesn't then lead to like a crisis scenario, because you have to almost construct the model when a crisis would occur and how it would look like. But I thought it was important to put this up for Venezuela, another oil economy. Now Venezuela has many different issues, but I think these metrics are very important. So these are the kinds of government balance deficits that Venezuela has, and these have been sufficiently high over a sufficient period to lead to where Venezuela is today. So with these kind of government balance deficits, it's led to sort of huge depreciation in the currency, very high inflation that just sort of recently just exploding out of control. It's hyperinflation, and it's led to the economy just declining year after year. So when Jared presents these scenarios for government employment, and when the government balance goes into deficit and stays in deficit, these are the kind of things could happen for Kuwait and could happen quite soon. So you can see that this was the sort of global recession, and then oil prices fell in 2014, and sort of quite quickly you get to these sort of very negative outcomes for the economy. So we haven't then ruled on what these outlooks would mean for Kuwait, but I think looking at somewhere like Venezuela, these are the kind of outcomes that such an unsustainable public finance position would lead to. Just a couple more slides to end is, and it repeats on what I said, the conditions for success of this model. We've done our best, we've taken the work so far, but this is what really needs to happen now. So you need technical capacity to maintain, run, and apply the model, and we have been delivering capacity training. The good thing about the model is it's user friendly. It's, I think everyone in this room could use it. The model also needs to be kept up to date as well. You need the latest global assumptions. You need all the latest Kuwait data in the model as well. Otherwise, the model becomes quickly out of date. You need a lot of collaboration between stakeholders. You need the model to be critiqued. You don't want to hide the model and keep it from people. You want the model to be accessible and transparent. And the Oxford model is highly transparent, and you'll have all of the documentation. And we want people to criticise the model, to suggest how to improve it, we defend what we've done. It needs to be used regularly. It needs to be applied. We've run many of our own tests. We've produced a white paper. You need to do a lot more of this to really test the model. It needs to be sort of periodically validated, and even some equations re-estimated. You need to assess the forecast performance, and you need to do these things like the back testing that I talked about. And the model shouldn't be static. It should be enhanced. It should reflect new developments as well. But what we've tried as far as possible is to build a model that maybe reflects some of the things that may happen in the future. So we've already set up a VAT structure, even though VAT is not currently being implemented. And just examples of collaboration. The model needs inputs from different stakeholders. It needs data from CSB, ideally fiscal inputs from the Ministry of Finance, other inputs from CBK. I think the private sector results, the private sector perspective on the economy and the outlook is also important. That could even identify other variables that stakeholders need. But then the model can also provide outputs that other stakeholders need. So for the Ministry of Finance, its fiscal model needs a lot of broader economic demographic inputs. It said for any organisation doing risk analysis, the model can help provide those different outcomes. And even on specific areas like the fiscal, really SCBD should work very closely with the Ministry of Finance on the fiscal side, on the KIA module with KIA, and as I said, other sort of peer review by academics as well. So hopefully that's given you sort of a good overall overview of what we've done, the model, its capabilities. As I said, it's not perfect, it needs tested. The real journey starts now for the model, and it's not the end. And I think after Jared presents the sort of white paper, we're very happy to answer any questions on the model. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, in the interest of time, we decided to keep going for about another 30 minutes, and then we'll have question and answer all at once at the end. So as Graham said, we're not, we were warned at some of our stakeholder meetings that nobody wants to hear doomsday scenarios. This is not, the intention is not to scare or to say something overtly negative. It's simply to put exactly like you described it. There are certain positive goals around the government's reform agenda 2035, targets that are intended to be met by 2035. The question is whether, in order to assess whether that's going to get you where you need to go on the positive side, are the reforms that are happening right now on the expenditure side enough to get your public finances where you even make it that far? So just to lay out for you how we're going to go through this, it's a little bit of background on the issue. We actually went through this as sort of a collaborative exercise within SCPD. Oxford was here this last week to complete our training and complete our white papers. So we sort of, rather than just go through another training, we said, let's go through this process together and come up with this paper. We'll take you through some of the key assumptions that we ran through the model and the oil price scenarios and how we decided them. And then we'll give you the financial and labor force data as well as the forecasts that come out of the model. And then we also ran a couple of public sector reform scenarios to give everybody an idea of the scope of the reform that is necessary, and then a little bit on next steps and areas of future study. So to start, anyone who follows even what's in the public domain here, I think the starkest statement came from the finance minister on June 3rd when he told Parliament that under any of the forecasts that Ministry of Finance run, even $100 a barrel, the General Reserve Fund will be depleted within a number of years, and then Kuwait faces a deficit. I think this is not new. In 2011, the finance minister said that wage increases are a real danger to the budget, and a fast rise in spending could lead to a devaluation of the currency, liquidating investments, withdrawing from state reserves. As part of our process, we looked at there's a lot of research that's been done in Kuwait. We looked at anyone that we thought was relevant to this project. We found a study in 2011 from Kuwait Banking Association, and they analyzed the impact of higher public sector wages at any oil scenario, and even at $150 a barrel, within 16 years, Kuwait would be in a deficit. And actually, their forecast was correct. Kuwait entered a deficit exactly where they anticipated. I think without going into it too deeply, it's not too much of a secret that anytime you have a dominant public sector, it ends up being a threat to private sector driving the economic growth. I think this is something that Dr. Khalid has talked about many times and is key to Kuwait 2035, which is switching to private sector-led growth. We just looked at a KPPC white paper that was produced within the last month or two, which points out the obvious that an oversized public sector is the main cause of low productivity in the economy. And that really the incentive structure of the economy needs to be changed to manage its failure so that individuals work in the private sector and private sector firms look beyond the domestic markets for their products and services. This we pulled just from a recent Oxford white paper that was done on the GCC labor markets. It shows, and we're going to use the statistic later in the paper, the public sector, the percentage of Kuwaitis that work in the public sector compared to the other countries, and public and private sector wages in Kuwait and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And one of their conclusions from the study is GCC public sector positions offer higher wages, more attractive benefits, shorter working hours, and better job security. As long as these conditions persist, public sector workers are not going to be lured by government efforts to promote the private sector. I think, again, for everyone here in Kuwait, sort of two examples of reform in the last few years was when the rollback of fuel subsidies happened in 2011 and the resulting political issues, as well as in April 2016 when there was a strike in the oil and gas sector. So there's no walking away from obviously the difficulty of having a discussion like this. I think here we took this information from Sheikh Mishal, obviously, is along with Dr. Khalid and some other key ministers in government pushing a reform agenda. Sheikh Mishal's PhD thesis is on this issue of how do you move from a government-promoted economy to one that is innovation and R&D driven. I think what he says it very well, that the reforms that are happening now are of limited value because they focus on the supply of the job market and don't really move away from the traditional government jobs, and that Kuwait needs to move away from a dependence syndrome. Now, just to give you a sense, this is historic data taken from Central Statistics Bureau, just to see that the trend is still going in what you would say is the wrong direction. Transfers being sort of subsidies, financing issues. Wages went from 37% of government expenditure in 2011 to over 51% in 2017. As we get into the forecast, we'll show you what our forecast is. I actually don't think, as we talk now about some of the assumptions, This is actually not a doomsday forecast. We actually forecast using oil prices that are fairly conservative and optimistic. A doomsday forecast would look at 50 or 60 or $40 a barrel oil over a couple of years and see the impact. Just to give you a sense of how we came up with the labor market, anyone, again, in Kuwait, some of the major issues in the last few years in terms of reforming public finances are around, raising the debt ceiling, restructuring the public sector pay, limiting public sector jobs for expatriates and Kuwaitization for the private sector, restructuring the subsidies, and various proposals like VAT, which have now been delayed. I think, looking at the numbers, you don't need a model to tell you that none of those are going to bring a sustainability of Kuwait's finances, absent a reform of the public sector wage bill. So now we were going to go a little bit and tell you our assumptions and the oil price scenarios to sort of try and put some numbers around what kind of savings, what kind of job reductions have to happen, and how quickly in order to get the finances on a sustainable level. So some of our assumptions was we simply took the new entrants to the labor market, we took the demographics and said we simply kept it fixed. So it's right now around 80%, we kept it there, assuming that 80%, and this is obviously not the government's intention, but this is our baseline. Is to say that whatever, and it's an exponentially increasing, I don't think that's any surprise to people here, the demographics of Kuwait means there's going to be an exponentially increasing number of new labor market entrants in the next 5 to 10 years. And again, for the purposes of this, we're assuming that 80% will continue to go to the government. And then we're also going to assume what has been historic, which is a 5% increase in wages on a yearly basis, on a fixed rate of expenditure on goods and services. And again, that we'll show you in one slide in our forecast. If you were to just keep all the jobs, what do you have to cut the wages by in order to be sustainable? Again, in another scenario or white paper, this can be adjusted, but this is just so we're clear on what our assumptions were here. And then we didn't touch the production. We just left it exactly at what the current levels are. Again, so these are the three scenarios you can keep in mind going forward. The first one is taking the 2018 average of what the world oil price has been at $74.1 a barrel. So we simply assume that that stays constant. The second one is to use Oxford Economics forecast, which I think is the next slide. You can see it's a little bit of a dip, and then it's actually a steady increase. I suppose in another scenario we could have taken everyone, BP, all the different oil forecasts are out there, and run those to the scenario, but we thought that this was in some ways an optimistic scenario for us for the purposes of the study. And then we run it at $60 a barrel, which is still higher than what it was in the past few years, but we figured that would be sort of a worst case scenario for the purposes of this study. Again, here just gives you the sense of where the Oxford Economics world oil price forecast is. This gives you a sense of historical and forecast public sector employment. Again, these are historic numbers in terms of 2007, 2010, 2015, and then you can see, again, this is assuming no reform. This is assuming business as usual and assuming that the public sector continues to grow at exactly the rates that it has. You can see the line very clearly. So it gives you a sense of the numbers. And then this is sort of the government balance. So you can see that more or less under $74 a barrel and under the Oxford scenario, which is a little higher, Kuwait returns to surplus briefly for 2 or potentially 3 years, and then the finances deteriorate. Whereas if oil were to go to $60 a barrel and stay there, they would never return to a surplus. So this just gives you some numbers around that. Again, following business as usual, Kuwait briefly returns to surplus in scenarios 1 and 2 before the expense of the public wage bill drives an exponentially increasing deficit. So this gives you a sense of the percentage of the deficit compared to the total fiscal expenditure. So in 2020, it's about 4.13, and then you can see how it increases going towards 2035. And again, this is something to keep in mind, which is why we showed you in the last presentation some of the Venezuela numbers. That was correlated with GDP, but it gives you a sense of the forecast. Again, this is the labor force of Kuwaiti nationals. So this is, again, historic, and then our forecast. And again, historic data and this is taken from Central Statistics Bureau, of what is the total labor market employed Kuwaiti nationals, and then Kuwaiti nationals working in the public sector, and you see the statistics. And again, we've used 80% and continued that number out for the purposes of our forecast. And now here's the public sector wage bill, just the brute force number of it. If you continue with business as usual, with the pay increases and benefits for public sector employees, keeping the current levels of employment and accommodating 80% of new labor market entrants in the public sector, you see an exponentially increasing expenditure on salaries. And then this gives you a sense of, going back to those original pie charts, absent major reform, compensation of public sector workers represents over 55% of total government expenditure after 2020. And this is just for reference sake. We didn't want to go into too much detail, but these are just an example of some of the other charts you could run around this. You see the interest payments as a percentages of government expenditure, the drawdown of the reserve fund, debt as a percentage of GDP. All of these are, the trend shouldn't be surprising, but these are all things that are to be looked at when you're sort of then doing when you're running the adjustment scenarios, and these will be helpful. Now just to go briefly we ran two scenarios to say, okay, how can the government put targets for a sustainable public sector? So the first scenario is, let's assume that the public sector employment levels are going to stay the same. In that case, what do you have to reduce pay and benefits to balance the budget, assuming there's, again, business as usual, no other reforms, no other revenue generating or expenditure saving measures. So this shows you that already by 2020, at the two sort of optimistic oil forecasts, you're going to have to reduce the wage bill in terms of salaries by about 14-15%. Under a less optimistic oil forecast that goes up to 46%, and you can see the numbers by 2025. And again, here is, just to refresh everyone's memory, the new job entrants. This shows the numbers of them, the new job entrants that have been going to the government. Historic data about how many there are, and based on Kuwait's demographics, how much you still have to find jobs for. And again, if you look at the data for the last 5 years, even with all the initiatives, there's no decrease in the momentum of Kuwaitis entering the public sector. So now here is a second scenario. If you assume that pay and benefits remain constant, what is the reduction in the total employment required to balance the budget, assuming no changes in other expenditure items? So this shows you that by 2020, to balance the budget, you have to reduce by roughly 60 or 65,000 jobs. And you can see under any of these scenarios, this is the entire cohort of new labor market entrants, as well as you'd have to let go of a sizable percentage of existing public sector jobs. Now, next steps. Now that we've scared everyone a little bit, why these business as usual scenarios ignore the impact of plan to discuss reform efforts, they also don't take into account other costs, which is the switch from public employment as welfare to a social safety net system. These are metrics that can and should be modeled. So in other words, once you have a sense, and I think this gives you a sense of how deep the cuts have to be, then you can have a discussion and start modeling, okay, what are the costs? What is the safety net? How are we going to switch people over to a welfare system as opposed to public employment? What kind of job training? What has to happen? What's the cost of that? And you can model all these and sort of come to a very sustainable and clear sort of trajectory. But also it's worth mentioning that these three oil price scenarios we modeled did not include a worst case scenario in which oil prices returned to those seen within the last 5 years, which reached $40 in 2016. That probably is also worth modeling. We think that this macroeconomic model, and hopefully this white paper, which right now is in PowerPoint form, but will be in a PDF form like their Brexit one for everyone to see, hopefully it will give people a sense of the framework of what needs to happen and allow the next step, which is to study the right combination of expenditure cuts and set a prudent pace for reform. And we hope that this model can be used to build trust between government entities and parliament and give confidence to the Kuwaiti public on the need and wisdom of upcoming changes. And I think now, Graham, if you want to come back up. I know everyone's anxious to get to the buffet, but we're happy to answer any and all questions you might have about any of what was presented.
very much. My name is Sulaiman Al-Qudsi from Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research, and I thank you for a very sharp presentation. In your presentation, you alluded to the macroeconomic model that was similarly produced by Kisser in the mid-1980s. I'd like to mention that Kisser just recently produced a report on business cycles in Kuwait, the dating of business cycles, and it is used also for forecasting short-term economic activity. And obviously, business cycles are extremely important for macroeconomic models and for policymakers. I was a little bit struck by some of the model structures as well as the conclusions. For example, you use the model that has 3,000 variables and 4,000 equations, vice versa, in order to forecast the future up to 2050. My understanding is that time series data in Kuwait is, for this sort of models, basically annual, and at best ranges between 60 and 70 observations, annual observations. And as a rule of thumb, in forecasting, you use there is 10% ahead rule, i.e. 6 to 7 years ahead, and not until year 2050. And more to the point, in the years to come, the vast technological changes that are sweeping the world, changing our lives, including the labor markets, the jobs that are going to be around in the next, let's say, 10, not 40 or 50 years ahead, are drastically different. What does it mean for Kuwait's labor market? And how do you accommodate such a thing in a model of this nature? I think I'd stop here. There are other questions, but I'd stop here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. First thing I say, I don't disagree with most of what you said. A model's ability to predict out 2050 is, it's limited because so much can change, and that's why we emphasize the importance of scenarios so much, because so much can change in the world, so much can change in the Kuwait. But the model offers a framework to look at the impact of technology on the labour market. So I think as you go further out in the future, your confidence in your central forecast and your probability is weaker, but the model can still allow you to look at the impact of technological change. That could be through total factor productivity, through just general productivity, and what that might mean for sectors and for productivity. I think this work you mentioned about business cycles is interesting, and as I said, this model is not static. For any new research that is undertaken, there should be an effort to reflect that research where possible in the design of the model. It's the point I tried to make is we have built a big comprehensive model, but there will be people who go and study one specific, maybe module or issue, and I think there's no reason why we couldn't reflect those findings on business cycles and incorporate that into the model as well. And you're right to flag the challenges with the data and the ability to do econometrics, but I still think it's better to have a model than not have a model, and the planning time frame is to 2035, so there is a need to produce numbers to that. But just, I think users have to be aware of the limitations of a model and the need to think about different scenarios and outcomes, because the ability of any model to predict far ahead is limited. But the important thing is the model provides a tool to look ahead and to look at what the future looks like under different assumptions.
My name is Imran Hayat. I'm a Chamber of Commerce, so I'm a bit of a different breed than. My first question would be, a stakeholder is the private sector, and I want to understand from you is how can we be more involved, and how can this tool help private sector be a tool stakeholder and in Kuwait. And honestly, this question, I don't know if Dr. Khalid would like to respond to, is can we introduce a variable to the model of the incapacity of the public sector taking decisions in the right time? And if we do that, does really the model even can be run? And because, you know, some issues that the model is addressing, we know from a long time, and we know the outcomes. And one thing is that the white paper you've done is something that I think everybody knows is really the effective decision making. Is there a variable in there taking into consideration basic decision making?
I think I suppose one thing that these models, and it's in other countries, is these aren't models just for government. These are models that can be advocacy, lobbying tools as well. So for example, if the government comes up with a new policy that you think is bad for the private sector, you know, use the model, look at the results and tell the government, if you do this, the outcome for the economy is negative or for the private sector. And then, you know, government may not always be aware that some of its policies, you know, conflict with its other objectives to develop the private sector and by what scale. So this is a model as much for you as it is for the government, and it's a model and tool for advocacy as well. I think your point around the efficiency, you know, there isn't, when you want to run a scenario, you think, well, what is the inefficiency or the delays? What is it hampering? Is it just that, you know, the government, you know, the business as usual continues for longer, and what impact that has? Or if, another way of looking at it is, if the government did make decisions quicker or made better decisions, how much better would the outcome be? There are lots of things you can model, maybe not always directly, but there are ways to, you know, link things to the variables that are on the model.
Yeah, just to continue, but I think, for example, you could have mentioned if VAT were implemented 2 years ago, what would the savings have been, and then how could that have, you know, maybe you could have, to keep sustainable, you could have had to cut less jobs or at less of a harsh pace. So I think in that way you could, with some thinking around the white paper, you can demonstrate delays in decisions and the cost to the economy. And I think as a practical follow-up, it would be great to just, if you have some ideas, things that are in the public domain or a policy that you think is worthy of studying, to simply email them to KPPC. KPPC is meant to be a think tank for the whole government and for the economy. So if you have some ideas, you or some staff that are with you that you'd like to send to discuss, that's literally the process we went for the white paper, starting with, you know, some big button issues and then testing some things out, and it was a collaborative process. So I think practically speaking, so that it doesn't die in this room, you know, that would be something to discuss directly with KPPC.
I think you went to the Chamber of Commerce while you are working on this. Did you sit with them?
It's possible. I have to look at the list.
Find the list. إذا مو موجودين اللي بياكلونها. أو في عدة أمور ودي أنا أوضحها وراح أتكلم بالعربي، جاري يعرف عربي. رقم واحدة من الإشكاليات اللي دائما يعاتب فيها مسؤول الحكومة إن وين الأرقام؟ عدل. هذا أرقام. رقم واحد. احنا حلينا إشكالية مهمة جدا إن لما المسؤول الحكومي يبدي يتكلم بالأرقام، والله يبغى هذا بناء على اجتهادنا، هذا اللي طلع معنا. تاخذون فيه ما تاخذون فيه، موضوع القرار في دولة الكويت is a very complicated decision making process whether we like it or not. هذا واحد. عدد الستيك هولدر أصلا في البوليسي ميكينج وايد مو شوي. فهذا إجابة بسيطة حق موضوع الأرقام، باعتبار أن أنا لما أقول يا جماعة خلينا نحد من التوسع في التوظيف الحكومي، يرد علي واحد يقول لي زين كم موظف؟ كم عدد اللي لازم أطلعهم؟ إيش كثر لازم أطلع؟ ومتى أبي أطلع؟ فأنا على الأقل عندي الحين إجابة بناء على ايرور معين اعتمد النموذج. هاي واحد. رقم اثنين، اصلا هذا التول حكوا يعتبر انا كذي قاعد اعطيك سلاح ترى. المره هذه تقول انتم الحين عندكم نموذج الارقام اللي انت قاعد تدخلها، تحط لي سيناريو يطلع لي كذي، يعني السياسه اللي انت قاعد تتبعها ما هي صحيحه، غيره. وهذا الهدف الاساسي في وجود نماذج اقتصاديه كليه تعني في مواضيع السياسات. ناخذ مثال. الحين حاليا احنا قاعدين نتكلم على نيو كويت 2035، اغلبها بناء على الرؤيه الساميه ان يكون البرايفت سيكتور ليدر في هذا الموضوع. هذا الموضوع ما هو سهل، القطاع الحكومي جزء كبير منه ما يبي هالشيء. ايضا البرايفت سيكتور هم ما يبي بعيد. اقول لك تقول لي شلون؟ اقول لك والله البرايفت سيكتور يقول انا قاعد اعتمد على مناقصات الدوله وعلى الاي بي سي كونتراكت. واي اي جو فور انفستنج في الدوله؟ لان انا احتاج ان الدوله يكون الايز اوف دوينج بزنس فيها جدا عالي، اقدر انا اشتغل وانا مرتاح علشان تقدر الليبر ماركت يتحرك، وما تنافسني انت على الليبر ماركت. شوف الديفرنسز في الويجز. انا الحين انا كحكومه انا قاعد اتنافس وياك على الموظفين. ذا جود هاي كاليبر ليش يروح البرايفت سيكتور في ويجز انا قاعد اعطيه اكثر؟ ايزي جوب، نايس، وناسه وغيره ومعاش. ليش يلك؟ زين هذا الموضوع شلون نطرحه احنا؟ ما غير نطرحه بارقام. هذه النماذج هذا المقصود فيها. سياسه الخطه الانمائيه الثالثه اللي جايه تعتمد اعتماد رئيسي على ان وحده الرقم لاثبات السياسه. بس بسيطه ترى. وعلى فكره انا مو قاعد اطلع ببدعه، موجوده من 86. الجماعه اللي يتكلم من معهد الابحاث اخوي الدكتور اللي يتكلم من المعهد، اهلا وسهلا. وقال انت في عندنا نموذج عندهم ايضا بريدكشن وما يحتاج هالكثر. وجهه نظر، هذه اجتهادات. في النهايه هذا اجتهاد مبني على مجموعه من الاسس، واحنا فاتحين ايدنا حق المعهد، ما حد سكر الباب ترى. حياكم الله. You try it, you test it, you criticize it, we are very open for criticism. ويعني انا في هالمناسبه احيي الدكتور العزيز دكتور صديق على وجوده معنا. دكتور صديق زارنا وايد احنا بالمكتب، واحنا تشرفنا ايضا ان شاء الله بزيارته في المعهد، وصار نقاشات وايده، ونحن نشارك الهم، الكل يشارك نفس الهم. الاشكاليه اللي عندنا وهي المهمه جدا، شلون نطلع من عنق الزجاجه، لا اكثر ولا اقل. بس علشان نطلع من عنق الزجاجه نحتاج ارقام. يعني هذه الارقام انا ليش طلبت من عندهم ديران؟ اهم مشكله موجوده عندي والكل يدري عنها، التضخم في الببليك امبلويمنت. احنا نسميه وين الماليه؟ في احد من الماليه هني؟ اختفوا. يبا الماليه كل مشكلتنا لما نقعد في اجتماعات لجنه الاطار قال لك شنو؟ الباب الاول. صار عندنا الحين تيرم موجود في الكويت، الباب الاول على طول تعرفوا ولا علاقه بالويجز. بس بعدين نقول لا احنا ما نقدر نمس الباب الاول، خلينا نشتغل على اشياء ثانيه. زين الباب الاول هو المشكله. والارقام لا في مستشارين بالماليه اخوي محمد موجود. اي يعني انا هذا اللي اقصده، احنا قاعدين نحط ارقام، في اجتهادات وفي ارقام، وندري ان الصوره مرسومه تحتاج الى نظره. اذا هذه الوقفه اللي احنا نحتاجها، طبعا النموذج شيء بسيط فيه اللي يخليه اضافه مو موجود في نموذج بحث الابحاث، سامحوني، عنده accessibility على global economic models على other models. هذه بالنسبه لي is an added value. ضاف 3-4 موديولات مو موجوده منها الاس دي جي موديل، هذا اذا حد انتبه ولا لا. I need it كدوله على اساس اني اطلع انا تقاريري المتعلقه بالاس دي جي. في بعض الموجودز الموجوده فيها شويه اضافات. كبر حجم الموديل، انا ما ابي ادخل في التكنيكاليتي ولا في الماثماتكس في هذا الموضوع. ارجع حق الغرفه، غرفه التجاره والصناعه they are very welcome to come and test scenarios، وهم قاعدين ينادون فيها. خلينا نجربها، خلينا نشوف، ويطلع الافكت. طبعا هو الافكتس اللي طلعوا لكم اياه محدود، ترى في وايد اشياء، تقدر تشوف وايد افكتس. الجماعه الاقتصاديين اللي هني اللي هم اساتذتنا في هذا الموضوع احنا تلاميذ عندهم يدرون ان هذه المؤشرات الاقتصاديه كلها قاعده تتغير اذا انت سويت شق في موضوع معين. مثلا عندنا اخوي عمران بعد من الاشياء الثانيه ان دليل التعاون بين السلطتين موجود ايضا في جهاز الحريري. جهاز حكومي قاعد يشتغلون على رؤيه مهمه جدا، رؤيه البي ار اي، البلت رود انيشيتيف. هذا سيناريو احنا قاعدين طلبنا من عندهم يشتغلون عليه. اذا سوينا هالجلوبال سيناريو، لاحظ البي ار اي المبادره الحزام والطريق مبادره جلوبال، نبي حد يرسمها لي انا علشان اقتصاديا اشوف اثرها علي. ممكن واحد يقول لي لا ما يبي لها شيء، بعد تدري استثمار وغير، لا الموضوع مو كذي، موضوع وايد فاريبلز فيه. فهم راح يشتغلون على هذه المبادره، نشوف شلون راح يكون انعكاسها علينا في الناشونال ايكونومي، بحيث اذا حد سال والله هذا اللي نشوفه انعكاسه ايجابا سلبا. هذا اجتهاد ايضا بس هو راي. طبعا احنا قاعد نضرب على قولتهم الفوركاستنج، ما بيكون رجما بالغيب، بس رجم بالغيب بطريقه علميه تعتمد على الديتا اللي راح تطلعها الاداره المركزيه للاحصاء، وهذا متعبتنا وايد لازم، وهذا التعب اللي موجود عندهم بالاداره المركزيه متعب كل الجهات، بس احنا اقرب لهم ترى. تبون اكسس مع اللابات مو ببلاش، بس حياكم الله. هذا الاكسسبيلتي للديتا عن طريق الشبكه الوطنيه للبيانات الاحصائيه وقاعد نشتغل عليه. هذه اجابه حق الموضوع المتعلق انه اوكي ايش راح نستفيد فيه؟ ببساطه كل سياسه تطلع، وهذا هدف مركز الكويت السياسات العامه، اي سياسه تطلع نبي نختبرها. صانع القرار، متخذ القرار، هذا فيري كومبلكس سيستم في الكويت في صناعه واقرار واتخاذ القرار. بس احنا على الاقل من صوبنا احنا نغطي الجانب اللي كنت اعتقد وما زلت انه الى الان ناقص، نحتاج وي بيلد. يعني اخوي رياض الفرس كان معنا بالامانه وكان هم بعيد اثار هذه النقطه قبل لا يمشي. احنا نحتاج بعض المكونات في عمليه التخطيط ناقصه، لازم اركبها. واذا ما دخلوا الكل في تو كريتيسايزد ما راح اقدر اطور. كريتيسايزنج حتى لو نيجاتيف كريتيسيزم بالعكس اي لاف ات. It is not about انت تقول وانا اقول، no it's about شنو اللي راح ينفع البلد بعدين. فهذا واحد من الاشياء اللي نتوقعها. اولا ومثل ما قلت انا بالكلمه انه هذا نموذج واحد من مكون في منظومه. احد النماذج بروفيسور حميد قاهري موجود؟ موجود، اشتغل على نموذج معين موجود. هذا الريزلتس اللي قاعده تطلع منه والبي بلجد ان حق المنظومه. في نموذج اخر ايضا راح يتم الشغل عليه ايضا بلجد حق المنظومه. فبالتالي هذا الريزلتس اللي موجوده it is output من نموذج واحد. ولا يمكن اني استعمل نموذج واحد وهي اقول هذا وبس، ما يصير. علميا ما يصير. يعني اي واحد فينا قاعد بالغرفه له قناعات في المنهجيات والاسس العلميه يدري ان هذا ما يصير. بس على الاقل اقول يبقى هذا اللي عندي، هذا السيناريو، هذا نسبه الايرور فيه، وهذا الاكشن اللي يو نيد تو تيك. كذي يكون على الاقل احنا سكرنا ثغره الاسس العلميه في صنع القرار. وهذا اهم شيء عندنا صراحه. انا كامانه عامه المجلس على التخطيط هذا تهمني وايد. يعني الوايت بيبر حلوه لما تطلع ان شاء الله راح توزع على الكل. احنا وي شير ذا ريبورتس مو مثل غيرنا. وي شير ذا ريبورت تو everybody has access حق اور ريبورتس. يقدر يدخل على موقعنا في الامانه يشوف شنو احنا قاعدين نسوي، حاطين كل الريبورتات. And we have no problem to share. I believe in open knowledge. الكل لازم يدري احنا ايش قاعد نسوي. It's transparency حتى الى درجه ان في بعض الاسئله البرلمانيه تجي لنا يسحبون البرنت من الموقع بالامانه ويسالوننا. جايب البيانات انت ماخذ مني، وهذا الشيء انا افتخر فيه. دائما نشير ايوه ان مرجعيه السؤال تاتي من موقع الامانه. هذا بالنسبة لنا فخر. بياناتنا قاعد تنحط، الإدارة المركزية للإحصاء قاعد تحط بياناتها، بعد will become even more friendly في الشبكة الوطنية إن شاء الله. فهذه إجابة حق بعض التعليقات. الحين آخر شيء وضحوه الشباب بعض السياسات اللي ممكن احنا ندخل عليها اللي ممكن to curb it down. Everybody knows about it. بس هذه لها امباكت اجتماعي. هذا النموذج ما يقوله. واعتقد ما حد يختلف معي. زين هذا الامباكت الاجتماعي، هل انا اوصل لما السكين توصل للعظم؟ ولا الحق شوي 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 علشان اخلق ما يسمى كوشن، ولا ادخل بالفنزويلا افكت. انا ركزت معاهم انه let's talk about فنزويلا. فنزويلا دائما very exciting example. ترى الوضع في فنزويلا صار on a step change. ولا انا غلطان صلحوا لي. all this كان مبين انه رايح الى هذا، صار البريك. احنا نسميها اتذكر انا في الهندسه هيستيريسيس. ما ادري اذا في الايكونومي they use the word hysteresis ولا لا. صار هيستيريسيس حق السيستم. فنزويلا الان انا هيستيريسيس مود ايكونوميكلي. انا ما ادري اذا التركيش ايكونومي will get into hysteresis mode. I don't know. بس هذا it's another issue ممكن نتكلم عنه. انا ما ابي ادخل ككويت في الهيستيريسيس مود. في احد راضي يرضى يدخل في الهيستيريسيس مود؟ احنا قاعد نقول ترى نشوف شيء يوحي 2011 قال هو شو المشكله اللي تصير؟ انا ابي اوضحها. وايد تنبؤات قديمه صارت تهدد الناس لما تشوف ما صار شيء. للحين ارد البيت انا راتبي ينزل كل شيء ماكو شيء، يقصون علينا. اكون صادق، 2011 قالت صح، 2009 قالت، 2008 قالت، 1986 قالت. شحلة لهم الكويتيين؟ لا ماكو شيء. You don't feel it, it's not being touching you in anything. شنو what's the problem؟ قاعد يقصون علينا، تخرعون فينا بس خرعون فينا. إذا what if اللي قاعدين نقوله يحتاج انه يكون متكامل علشان اقول لك صح، لان في عوامل ثانيه قاعده تساعد. انا دائما اقول الكويتيين يدفعون صدقات فالله يدفع عنهم البلاء. وسويت كورليشن بس هذا this is the fun، هذا جوك ما ادري قاعد تسجل هني بس it's a joke. سوينا how much we give charity مع سعر النفط، كل ما نجيب more charity سعر النفط يزيد يعني. There is a correlation there. It's very interesting. جماعة كسر good to study it. It's another, it's very interesting. شلون صح احبابي؟ كل ما تزيد بخيراتك الظاهر رب العالمين يسهلها عليك. فانت ما تحس بالمشكله، بس هي الايشو الحقيقيه انه هي سوري على الكلمه it is not جاك الذيب. احنا يعني اكو في عندنا كلمه بالكويتي جاك الذيب، وتروح ماكو ذيب. لا ترى الذيب بي بس ما ندري متى. في شيء جاي، احنا ندري انه جاي اذا بنستمر في وضع معين. incapacity of public employment I love it. انا من غير incapacity عندي مشكله، انا لو احط incapacity بالنموذج لا بالله كدينا خير. يعني انا ترى بالنموذج ما نحط الافشنسي برودكتيفيتي، لا قاعد اقول لا يبقى البرودكتيفيتي 100% والكباسيتي روعه، وهذه المصيبه عندي. حط عليه برودكتيفيتي، حط عليه incapacity، حط عليه ستريس على الانفراستراكشر. لا by the way هذا result is minimum even in the worst in the best case scenario. اوكي فاحنا نتمنى طبعا احنا ما ندخل في هذه الديفيسيتس وهذه المشاكل وغيرها، لكن احنا قاعدين نستخدمها الان بتعميق مفهوم سياسه البرايفتايزيشن اللي هي المبنيه عليها نيو كويت 2035 والبارتنرشيب. طبعا برايفتايزيشن ثرو بارتنرشيب، دائما انا اركز على هالكلمه. It's another form of wealth distribution through privatization and corporatization. ما هي pure privatization للعلم بس. ولا الغرفه بعدين ما نقدر عليها. فهذه الصوره العامه حق النموذج، وانا اعتذر على الاطاله بس لان تم الاشاره الي للاجابه. القطاع الخاص دائما يتحرش فيني. اوكي، اذا في اي استفسارات قبل ان نقعد تفضل واحد حكي ولا حكي حكي انا واقف.
I have a question about the granularity of the model and how flexible it is to out-of-the-box ideas. So as an example scenario, can you model a way in which you abolish completely all of the electricity, water, and fuel subsidies, but that revenue would go back to citizens as a rebate, as a cash flat rebate to every citizen? Yes. Can the model forecast efficiency changes? Can it model can it forecast efficiencies in electricity consumption, in fuel consumption, in all of these things?
So what you need to know if you abolish the subsidy, just what the new prices will be. So we have the CPI broken down into different categories. So you would obviously have that initial increase in prices. You would then free up, you would create extra fiscal, money in the budget to then decide what you do. If you want to transfer that to households, you can transfer that to households, and you can see are households better or worse off from more income but higher prices. But also then if the government can, I guess it can spend the money on other things, and does that help sort of long-term sustainability? So it could be that transfer is only temporary for a couple of years. So it might be fiscally neutral in the short term. The revenue you gain, you compensate, but you're just providing a cushion to households until and in the long term you will have a fiscal boost. So yeah, I think on something like that, the key thing is you can either add variables to the model, but what's better is you want to change the variables that are on the model. So the model doesn't have a direct link between sort of the amount government spends on subsidies and the price, because to be honest, that requires sort of what we call as off-model. There'll be other people who will do that in detail and then can plug in the assumptions to the model. But yes, it can do exactly that. What I would say with scenarios as well is there is work with. Some scenarios are simple. You change the world oil price, you change production. Other scenarios require a bit more off-model work with people who know better than, that's what I particularly said about the Ministry of Finance. They can provide all of these reform assumptions, and then they will need to ask, well, what would that mean for prices? But yes, that's the advantage of having a big model with many variables is you just need to change those existing variables.
I also want to add my voice to the previous persons on the explanation of the model and the good presentation. My comments are going to be very helpful. I'm just asking them to understand, given my limited experience in macro modeling quill. Two questions that are conceptual and one on the forecasting aspect, the empirical part of it. I'm glad that you recognize the dichotomy of the Kuwait economy, the duality basically, oil, non-oil, public, private, Kuwaiti, non-Kuwaiti. The structure is important, especially in large-scale models like yours. You have to look carefully on all of them, and from there you arrive to some kind of reduced form at the end. Reduced form means there is one economy. And I'm not sure, because this is a difficulty that we used to have in other models. How would you go from this kind of dichotomy? How did you handle it to come up with the final economy when you come up with a reduced form, upon which, if you would like to go back to the structure, you do some kind of restrictions, could be theoretical or empirical, and go back to see the impact upon which you can answer specific policy questions in each sector. That is, I couldn't see it here because I think the model is silent in this one. Related to that one is the number of the variables. When you have a large scale like that, there has to be some clear closure rule. The thing we had before in our, because there is a supply, demand, and so on, the closure rule to us at that time is looking at the change in stock, which is a balancing factor. between supply and demand, and that is function of prices, so that if there is inconsistency, this immediately, that will create the model. I didn't know what closure rule do you have, so that's just a question. This is important because it will take me to the second question, which is the forecasting. Hoping that you have a well-described structure of the model upon which you can go to forecasting. Then there are certain statistics on it. Later on I will try to get into it and see whether that explanatory power is high or low. But to go to forecasting, again, the issue which is raised before about the data. And this is the two questions I want to conclude with. One is, you have a data, historical data upon which you are doing your forecasting. I would like to look at the length of it and the consistency, because this is a big problem here as far as, when we did models in Kuwait before, given my limited experience, is that we spend a lot of time into the consistency of the data and comparing it with others, as opposed to taking it from GSOSO. Because the benefit of the model is not just the descriptive end, but one of the advantage of it is to improve the consistency of the data also itself. And I would like to see how did you treat that one, because that will go into forecasting. And this relates to an issue that was raised by Dr. Khalid Mahdi, where I can say that because I was involved in these Kuwaiti models since mid-80s. Those models in the mid-80s are really linked to international models, like the reduced minimum standard macroeconomic model, ransom of the World Bank. Kuwait was one of those, it related to that one. The second one was the link model, which is by Professor Lawrence Klein for the UN, and I myself presented somewhere to compare the growth in resource-based economies like Kuwait and others. So from that perspective, that model, which is in the other experiment of models that are done, I think is linked to internationally, and then it could be compared accordingly. Thank you very much.
Hi, can I ask a question about, so you have the model now, and you highlighted the problem. Now we understand the problem. Is it possible that you set up, let's say you want to break even in 2030. So then you arrive at a solution, which is, well, the required solution to create, let's say, 300,000 jobs, for example. So that's one step further. The following step, which I'm interested in, is to highlight which type of economic sectors from the private sector that can create such jobs, which is relevant to the Kuwaiti society. Then we provide a specific solution. Let's say we have to grow the financial sector or grow the entertainment sector. That will create, let's say, 100,000 jobs here, 100,000. Do you model that? Is that part of it, or do you end up, do you just stop at where the problem is?
No, the model can help answer. So if you want to say grow other sectors, you need to ask the question, what's the realistic growth of those sectors? You know, there have to be, if it's a domestic sector, there has to be demand. Because the problem is if you reduce lots of government jobs, you reduce a lot of income in the economy unless you replace it. So the truth is, if you said you had a policy that you were going to reduce government employment to boost retail, the truth is that's not consistent, because where will the consumer spend be to boost the retail? It might be you need a policy that you want to reduce. It's outbound tourism. You want to, I don't know whether it's, Kuwaitis go to Dubai to shop. You want to try to develop policies that keeps the money within the economy as well. But yes, certainly the model will also look at what scale of job creation is potential. I guess something like construction as well is very much led by the demand from the economy, the public and private sector. So the model can help predict what's a realistic level of growth with the construction sector. You also have the input-output framework in the model that links the demand in the economy and the demand from other sectors to that demand. To just suddenly suggest extra jobs on top of that would tell you that you would have to be starting to export those. And the model could say things like, if you're going to lose 300,000 jobs in government and spread them across different sectors, the model will say, well, that's a lot higher than the model predicts. You know, you'd have to, it's much higher than the current number. You know, the competitiveness improvement is just not there to justify it as well. It's why I made the point about the exchange rate. This idea that you can develop non-oil export sectors with a currency peg or basket is quite, you know, difficult to assume, because what else is going to make? And I think even to the issue of moving Kuwaitis into the private sector, that is going to increase wage costs in the private sector. At the same time as you maybe implement energy price reforms, it just doesn't all stack up that makes those, either the competitiveness of those sectors or the sort of economic conditions don't justify the level of growth in those sectors. But I think the big point is, yes, the model can help map the solution, it's just not about identifying the problem. But it does it in sort of an economically coherent way.
Okay, can speak loud. So when countries go through deficit in the budget, they try to come with a package of economic reforms. So it goes from cutting from the budget expenditure, and it might also be to evaluating the currency, subsidizing, changing the subsidy system. So how can this model tell you what the effect that, such, for example, if we go like we want to devaluate the Kuwaiti dinar and change the subsidized petroleum products into cash to Kuwaitis, can I see the impact through this model of this reform action on inflation, on prices of specific commodities, for example? Does it go that deep in details?
So it's not something the model has 4,000 variables. Most of them are endogenous, so if you change one part of the model, most of the rest of the model changes that. It's also another test of the model that I didn't check, is that do variables change when you run shocks through the model? So yes, some of those are variables you can change directly, some that you might have to do some what we call off-model calibration to like then shock the variables on the model. But that, I think that's exactly right. You can look at, Jared only presented how many government jobs you need to cut the wages. If you implemented that, you would then see the impacts on the economy. To be honest, it would cause Kuwaiti unemployment to shoot up, because the private sector wouldn't create enough jobs, and to be honest, the private sector would be weaker, because if you cut 300,000 jobs in government, you're taking a lot of spending out of the economy as well, and you know, probably it would put inflation down because of demand in the economy. So yeah, that's exactly how the model. And when I did the Brexit study, you know, Brexit had lots of variables that aren't in the model, but we did this off-model calibration, and then we ran those shocks through the model to model what we thought the impact of Brexit would be.
For example, I'll give an example of my question. For example, if we change the subsidizing the fuel into cash and increase if we apply this, can you see the impact on food prices, for example, to that model?
I suppose part of food prices are imported, and so they depend on world prices and on exchange rates as well. So for things like prices, it also depends on what's imported, what's domestic. If something was pure domestic, it would be driven by sort of domestic development. But if it's an imported product, actually your domestic demand doesn't matter so much, because it's driven by world prices and the exchange rate as well. But yes, you know, if there is a link between prices and demand and sort of output gap. So if the economy is operating well below capacity, it puts downward pressure on prices. If your economy is overheating, it tends to put upward pressure on prices as well, and upward pressure on wages too. So the model does have quite a detailed pricing module.
I think we're past time, so let me go to the buffet and then do any other questions.